So, hi everyone. We are so glad you're here. I'm Morgan Martin, and I'm joining you today alongside Jono Young. Together, we're hosting this session on behalf of COEP Projects, where we help organizations and entrepreneurs bring structure, strategy, and momentum to their big ideas. At COEP, we specialize in helping teams move from vision to execution, whether that's through project management, systems design, or hands on operational support. Today's workshop is all about the rising cost of failure, and it's about the hidden price we all pay when operations, communication, or project alignment break down, whether that cost shows up as lost time, missed opportunities, or burnout. It's something every team faces and something that we believe can be prevented. So, Jono Young is a hands on product design and strategy leader with founder DNA and boundless energy. His core philosophy is simple: failure is optional, and leading with design is the most effective way to create products that succeed. As a product design and strategy leader, Jono has helped startups and growing teams uncover problems early, reduce risk, and accelerate growth by applying proven frameworks such as task level design, processes, triad team structures, and performance based measurement models. His work has driven major engagement gains, unlocked significant cost savings, and guided teams in turning complex challenges into measurable results. Jono has led design teams through 8 acquisitions, 2 IPOs, and 1 equity exit. His mission is to teach founders and teams how to succeed by applying proven processes, building strong teams, and uncovering failure early so they can grow with confidence and deliver products customers love. So, with that, we are excited to have Jono share some tools, frameworks, and real world examples that you can apply right away. And as we started out, we'd love to make this as interactive as possible. So, please feel free to use the chat, share experiences, or ask questions as we go. And with that, I will turn it over to you.
Awesome. Thank you, Morgan. Great introduction. Thank you, everybody, for joining the call. My name is Jono. If you are on LinkedIn attending this event, feel free to message me on LinkedIn. I'm easy to find on other communication channels. And just to let you know, this presentation will be available after the call. So that's a question that comes up often. So we will make this available, and I would love for you, as I'm going through some of these concepts, to use the chat, the Q&A in the right-hand side, and Morgan will do the best to field some of those questions. And Morgan, as a co-pilot in the presentation, if you see something that's just like, oh, we have to ask this right now, feel free to interrupt and stop me. But thank you all for joining. I've got a lot of behind the scenes content that I'm going to share with you. I'm going to show you exactly how I do things in life. But I want to start by just kind of letting you know what we're going to cover and a little bit about myself. So the rising cost of failure is all about this mentality in the startup world, or you're starting a company, that you should fail fast. And I've always sort of disagreed with that. So I'm going to go over a couple of the problems that exist within that concept. I'm going to go over how to hire the right people to work on solutions to those problems. I'm going to show you the process that I use as quickly as I can. And then we're going to go over an example of where all of these things I've talked about is actually provided return on design. And I'm going to show you how you can use these things, these processes, these techniques, no matter really what field or industry that you're in. So a little bit about me. When I was first growing up, my parents are always asking me, what do you want to do when you grow up? And the first job I thought I wanted to have was a train driver. I think I was probably like 4 or 5, and I just thought trains were really cool. I didn't even know there was a conductor as a job title, but I thought, yeah, I'm going to be a train driver when I grew up. And then as things advanced, like many kids, I fell in love with animals, and I really liked taking care of animals. And I started reading like animal anatomy books when I was 12. And I thought, oh, I'll be a veterinarian. But then I realized that part of being a veterinarian is also having to put animals down. I thought, well, I love animals and I love saving them, but I don't think I can deal with that. So as I progressed in age, graduated from high school and went into college, I thought, okay, I was a fine artist as a fine art major. I entered an art contest scholarship and won that to Villa College, which is now Stevenson University. It's an awesome university, a small campus. And I showed up there thinking I was going to be an art teacher. I figured, yeah, I'll have the summers off. That sounds great. I'll do art. And then I saw the curriculum and the things that I had to do, and getting up at 6:30 in the morning to go to a literature class wasn't quite my thing. So then I found out about Photoshop, and around that time, the internet was coming about, and I was focused on print design, but I had great counselors at Stevenson University. They told me about Photoshop and the internet and this new major that they had for visual communication and graphic design, and the rest is history. I left paper behind and headed straight into the internet. So I was fortunate to have some internships out of college, and early in my career, I worked for a company called the Brook Group in Ellicott City, Maryland, and they worked for Fortune 100 companies, Fortune 500 companies. The first day on the job, I was redesigning web applications for Bank of America. We went on to do 1/3 of America Online's advertising work, and we did a custom content management system for the White House and some of the largest government organizations. So I cut my teeth doing custom application design for a startup way back in the early 2000s, before the dot bomb. In 2005, I moved to Charleston, South Carolina, where I live today. I started my own startup business called Chesapeake Studios, and then changed that name to Charleston Web Solutions. For a number of difficult reasons, I had to leave that behind, and I joined Blackbaud, which is the world's largest provider of nonprofit software. And this was my first taste of being a designer in a company that's going public. So we were a publicly traded company. We went on to acquire our largest competitors, and that was a pattern as I went to these design-driven companies that I saw repeat. In 2013 to 2017, I was at Spark. That was an incubator, and we built lots of great products. And Booz Allen Hamilton went on to purchase that company. Then I got into healthcare. In that healthcare company, I was the first designer in, and we went through a number of acquisitions there, another IPO. And then I left that company, went to the Ideal Life. And Morgan mentioned these IPOs and equity exits. The Ideal Life was the first time that I'd been in a company that just failed and had to shut down and couldn't continue. It's a fantastic company. They downsized, let everybody go. And that takes me into today. I'm working for a company called Global, and it's my third week. And I am literally living right now what I'm about to show you. So I've been doing product designs and startups for about 25 years. And there was this moment in 2010 when I'm on the phone with this client, and I get off and I turn to my team. I had a team of about 6 people at that time. And I said to them, they're asking us to build them a crazy balloon raft, but all they're giving us is a hammer and a bunch of nails. This is not going to end well for anybody. They're essentially asking us to construct this balloon with hammers and nails, and the whole thing was just going to explode. And I had been through this enough times. I knew, okay, something has to change. So this was the moment in 2010 where I really started digging into a better design process and objective design and measurement. So you've probably seen all the statistics, and I've linked to a number of them, 40 plus statistics about startups, but 90% of startups fail. And I've been part of many startups and none of them failed. So for some reason, I've not been part of that failure except for one time. So I'm more in like a 10% fail rate. And I think it's because the teams I've been able to work with or the processes I've been able to follow lend themselves to identifying failure early and avoiding failure way late in the cycle when you just can't shut down, you're out of revenue. And this is what it looks like. So as you begin a project, if you're a founder or you're working on a small team and you have this idea or this concept and you want to take it to the market, there are phases of work. And this is a process that I've built. It's a 6-phase process. It begins with discovery, which is about 16% from start to finish, goes into research, architecture, design, building, or development, as most folks would call it, and then releasing. And I use the word build because this process has been used for code and applications and even beach rental companies. Like this can be applied to anything. So failure can be identified, the cost of failure can be avoided. But what you see is as you begin, there's no cost association with failure. And as you wait and go longer to identify problems that you hadn't seen, that cost of failure gets really high. So what we want to do is identify failure early, make it part of the process, not make it part of you release and nobody shows up, nobody's signing up, you're not making any revenue. And I'm going to walk you through how I've been doing that with the people and the teams, and then a process that has worked out for me really well. So the takeaway here is failure is common, but it's optional and it's avoidable. The mentality that Agile brought with failing fast can work, but obviously if 90% of startups are failing, they're probably not doing it the right way. The cost of failure rises the longer you wait to identify it. And failing without measuring is just failing. So if you don't have a way to measure your product and how well it's working from the day you begin, you're putting yourself into that 90% category. And I'm going to show you how to avoid that rising cost of failure. So I want to talk briefly about people. I have been the first designer in or very early into companies that have grown huge. I've been in situations where I'm working for a company and we acquire our biggest competitor. And if any of you have a competitor, the focus is it's on beating them every single day. Well, when you acquire them and they join you, you have to figure out quickly how to get your enemies to now be your friends and work together for the benefit of the customer. And so if you're just starting out, you got to think, okay, I'm going to succeed. I'm not going to be part of that 90% failure. If you're a founder and you're looking to build a team, or if I am building a team, this is always my recommendation is to build the triad. The very first person I would hire, even before myself, is a product manager. I think the product managers are the single most important role in the company. And I'll show you how they can go on to advance their career and sort of hold everything together. This triad really should be there to support the founder or the CEO, or if it's you with an idea and you're going out to raise funds for hiring a team, this is the way I would do it. I'd hire a product manager, a product designer, and then a product engineer in that order. When the triad grows, if you remember that 6-phase process, discover, research, architecture, design, build, release, these 3 roles of product manager have to be a generalist. And as your team grows, they go from being a generalist into more of a specialist. In general, though, the product manager will handle the product discovery and the user research. And if there's a designer in the crowd, you might be saying, well, I'm supposed to be doing the user research. I'm the user experience designer, or I'm a user interface designer. And that's true, but as a designer, your responsibility early needs to be on getting the architecture and the design right. You would collaborate and work with the product manager, but offload that work to the product manager. They need to be good at understanding what the users need. And I'll show you why that matters in the next slide that covers the continued growth and career paths for each of these roles. And then the engineer, I mean, if there's any engineers on the call or developers, there's this bad reputation for like what engineers care about and don't care about. If you're hiring a team, you got to hire the right engineer. You can't just hire somebody that's going to be in a closet coding. They don't want to interact. You've got to find an engineer that's open and active and willing to be more of that generalist, especially early in the process. They're going to have to handle some of the marketing. If you're a founder and a team of 3, somebody's got to do the marketing, and it involves some technical capabilities. In the teams that I've worked with or in the roles where I was the only person, I tend to be the product manager, designer, and engineer and balance some of these things. But this is the order I would hire them in: manager, designer, engineer, because you have to have somebody to organize when work's going to get done and what needs to get done, communicate to the founder, the CEO, or communicate to the team. Then you need to design it and prototype it. You could design and prototype in code, going with an engineer first, but most engineers that I've worked with, they like to have some design artifacts, user flows, the architecture, the colors, the design systems, and that sort of thing before they get started. So because we're not going to fail and we're not in that 90% fail group, we have to hire and plan for career growth and career paths. So these are the career paths that tend to work out really well for product managers. They can become a product owner. They could go and become a scrum master, but they make great candidates for chief product officers or chief operation officers as the team begins to grow. There's sort of this pushing people up the org chart mentality as people grow. So hire the right people and plan for growth, give them the opportunity to cross career paths if they want to. But the reason we start with those first three is because the product manager can really go on to be a great chief product officer or a director. The designer career paths are front end or back end. So you can be a front end or back end architect. You can do just wireframing, just sitemaps that can lead into accessibility. But designers also go on to make great co-founders or CEOs. A lot of design-led companies or companies that were started by designers go on to be more successful, I think, at a 32% greater rate. So if you have a junior designer that's been there for a while, they make great candidates to go into some more leadership roles as well. And then engineers, they can go front end, back end, database administrators. They can go on to be great chief technology officers, especially if they built this thing from a bootstrap state. But don't just hire what you need right now. You need to hire for the future because we're not going to fail, and look for people that have a cultural match that want to help you succeed and eventually go on to a much greater role. This is one thing that I have not found a great way to do yet. So I believe the entire company should be agile. I believe the entire company should be in your sprints, marketing, support, sales. If you work with a marketing team or a sales team or a support team, you're probably thinking, well, that's impossible. And for whatever reason, that's the mentality. But because we're starting small and we go from a team of 3 to 6 to 9 to 12, there's no reason not to have your marketing and sales teams involved in the sprints and the planning and the everyday work. And I'll show you some examples of why that matters as we continue. This is what it might look like. This is from a pitch deck that I presented several years ago to a company where I was the first designer, and the things I was designing were sort of thrown over a fence, and I would start working on it, and then we would show it to the board or show it to the leadership team, and they would say, oh, that's not right. That's not the right thing. We'd have to start over again. So what I did is I said, okay, well, let's bring leadership in at the beginning and the end of each sprint. So every 2 weeks, leadership was involved and support was involved and marketing was involved. And as we went closer and closer to the release, when we were going to release the product or release a new feature, you'll see that support, marketing, and sales are more and more involved. And the point of this is by the time you release your product or feature, sales, support, and marketing have already been part of that process for weeks. They don't have to scramble to come up with marketing copy. And the real beauty of this is right in the middle, when you've got design and engineering and marketing and sales and support working together 3 weeks before a release, and the release comes, everybody already knows what to do. And I'm going to show you how that all comes together in the process phase of this. But get everybody involved. Invite people to your sprints. Invite them to your product meetings. If you're using Google Docs or Monday.com or Jira or Linear, whatever management tool you're using, get people in, especially early when you're small, and have them communicate with you constantly so there's no surprises. Okay, so quick recap on the people. Hire for the triad. Product manager first, ideally, then designer, then developer. You're going to need generalists, people that can wear many hats. Really, you'd want somebody probably with 5 to 10 years of experience. If you can hire senior or higher experienced folks early. That's going to help you in that whole career growth and help you avoid the failure. We want to set up every department to be agile. I don't think it's a can or should, it's a must. If you're starting early, your culture should be marketing, sales, engineering, support. They're all part of the same product. We're all going to work together constantly. And if anybody is doing that, I'd love to know about it in the chat. This is probably the biggest gap that I see when I show up at companies that are larger, that marketing is sort of like this afterthought, or sales is this afterthought, but it really should start and be integrated in the process.
Donna, we have one question come in about a project manager role.
Let's hear it.
Oh, just what about a project manager role? Does it fit into your triad
Oh
differently?
yeah. So that's number one. So product manager is the first person that I would hire. Product manager would handle, and you'll see this in a second, the discovery and research portion of it, where they're responsible for working with the founder to define the goals, the target audience, how we're going to measure that success criteria. And they can go and work with the designer and the engineer to say, hey, designer, hey, engineer, I think this is our audience. This is the success metric. I don't know anything about code or product analytics. How can we make sure that we're measuring this from day one?
Great. So in this case, you're kind of marrying the product and the project skill sets together because it's early on in the triad.
I think, so it was a question project versus product. Yeah,
Yeah.
totally interchangeable. I think, so in my experience, the product manager is more like sprint and team alignment and communication with leadership. But a project manager essentially should be doing the same thing, but sometimes they're more of like a coordinator of resources. So I think it's one of those opportunities where project and product are interchangeable. But I'd love to know if a project manager uses a tool different from a product manager, but I would treat them the same. And I think it gets back into this career path. So you come in as a product manager, and it's not your thing. You go to the founder, you say, I'd much rather be a project manager, and you could plead your case for that. So I think it's a really great question to think when you're hiring. But this presentation is geared towards product managers, but you give me a great project manager, and I think they could also be a great product manager.
Thank you.
Great question. Okay, so let's take a look at the process. The process is all about winning 16% at a time. It's not about failing fast. It's about winning fast. But if there is failure, spotting it really early. So what I want to do for the next few minutes is show you just some of the way that I do this. And I typically am doing this as a team of 0 to 1. Like I'm just the only designer there. I'm having to do a lot of this stuff on my own. But in a previous role, I spent 225 hours in addition to my normal 40, or let's be realistic, 50 to 60 hours of work. I spent 225 hours in 1 year training my team as it grew from 3 to 13 to 32. And this team that I put that time in, they stayed and they grew. And we went on to be a team of 60 that split into a general markets and an enterprise team. So I'm going to just cherry pick some of the tools and techniques and show you some examples of the tools that I've been using or the process that I've been using. And here is that, if you remember that rising cost of failure diagram, this shows each of those phases, and each one of them really is about 16% of the process. And I think a lot of times when we think about startups and products and creating companies, a lot of the attention goes to development or the engineers, and that's really 16% of the process. So I find myself often educating and training teams and companies on what I call the other 83%. But generally speaking, you can see here again, the product manager handles the first two phases, the product designer in the middle, and the product engineer towards the end. And I think it's crazy too. I know you're thinking it's crazy that a product engineer is going to do like marketing and release management, but somebody has to do it in the beginning. So it might be that you swap the design and engineer for the release marketing or marketing campaigns, and we'll explore that a little bit. these are the things that I do in each phase. And it's not everything, but this is a high level understanding or capture of what I need to make sure I do before going from one phase to the other. And so in the beginning, you want to define the problems to solve and measurable success criteria. You might have heard something like SMART goals. There's unlimited numbers of goal setting frameworks, but the point is to define success and how you're going to measure it. And you want to break that down into your particular target audience or your users. So if you're building a product, I have an example that we were building a product for call center pharmacists. You want to say, okay, for a call center pharmacist, this is the problem we're trying to solve. Here's the success metric we're going to measure, and here's how we're going to measure it. And we'll talk a little bit about time to value in just a bit. If you write anything down for this presentation to go back to your desk and figure out, it's what's the time to value for my most important customer, and how do I measure that? So the research phase is all about taking what you think is your biggest problem to solve and who you're solving it for, and finding those people and saying to them, is this your biggest problem? Is this the one we should be solving for you? Can you tell me more about it? I'm going to show you some examples of how you're going to learn that what you thought you were going to work on isn't the right thing to be working on. And if you're not doing that, if you're not talking to your real users, then you're putting yourself into that 90% fail bucket really quickly. A lot of companies jump straight ahead in design, into build, without asking the users what problems they actually want us to solve. And you're putting yourself at risk for that high cost. So find out early, right after the discovery phase, if what you think you're going to do for the next 4 to 6 to 7 weeks to 6 months is the right thing. Then we move into the architect phase. Basic drawings, napkin sketches, show it to people. Draw a piece of paper, show it to somebody. Walk around in a mall, go to a Starbucks, find anybody that's willing to talk to you. Find anybody on your team that's willing to talk to you. Go to your peers, just sketch out some ideas. As many as you can, quick and fast. We'll move into the design phase. I'm going to cover these phases in more detail here, so I'll speed through. But the important thing is during the design phase is to take what you learned by testing your low fidelity prototypes and sketches with real users, then iterate on them and refine them. And I'm going to show you how to not go past design into build until you're ready. So when you get into build, this is very, very broad. You're coding, you're translating designs into prototypes. There's lots of product coordination. There's lots of these handoffs, but if you have a team that's agile, it's not so much a hand off as much as it is a conversation on how this thing we built will need to be, how we need to train our users how to use it, how we're going to need to support it, how we're going to run marketing campaigns that get people to sign up for it, and so on. And then the release phase is all about taking that goal that you designed for and validated and built a working solution for, and simply telling your audience about it, and then watching how quickly they come, sign up for the product, and then you're measuring that time to value. So let's take a look at how this process works. The whole point is to find failure early when it's very inexpensive. Here's a quicker look or a deeper dive into what discovery is: defining goals, defining your users, and measuring them. Well, what's that look like? How do you actually do that? I think the best framework I've found for doing discovery is the North Star framework. If you do a Google search or GPT, whatever you're searching in these days, look for Amplitude's North Star playbook. It's deep, but it's the best documentation of how to run the North Star framework at your company. I always start there. And with Amplitude, your company could have one North Star metric. It's never revenue. It's never, okay, we need to make money. The North Star metric is the one thing, the one number that if it goes up, then your company will make more revenue. And you focus your whole team on all the different features and functions and user flows that impact that number. And that's what you're designing in your sprints. So the North Star playbook by Amplitude is great, a definite must read. So once you've defined your goals, you have a North Star metric, hopefully. You can start to predict what kind of revenue can we make if this design process goes as we expect. You need to make sure you have your users defined. So you might be, I wish we could get a shout out in the chat for like a user type, but essentially I say, who's the target audience? So maybe it's university students as a target audience. And I'll say, well, what kind of university students do you have? And an example might be freshmen. It might be undergrads. It might be alumni. It might be alumni who don't have jobs. Like they still are technically maybe in that student category. And then I say, okay, tell me about the alumni without a job. What tasks are they going to do in this solution that you're creating for them? So we define success, we define the users, we define the task that we need those users to complete. And then you'll see later that we instrument how to measure how long it's taking those users to actually accomplish that task. And if it's taking more than 15 minutes or the conversion rate is below 70%, then I'm going to show you how you can be alerted automatically and know in real time whether or not this thing you're building, this solution, this feature you're building is succeeding before you even launch. I really like the Moscow model for going through product requirements. There's sometimes something called a product requirements document that you may have heard of. But the Moscow model I really like because it forces you to define what must happen. So M is for must, the C is for could, the W, MOS, must, could, should, and then not won't. So Moscow's must, could, should, won't. I don't like to use won't. I think it's more like won't right now or will eventually. But you get these requirements that either must be in the product or we must have or should have or could have or won't right now. Sometimes there's things that, your teammate comes up with a crazy idea and we all say, no, we're definitely not doing that. So you could have a will never do this thing. Sometimes it does help to have focus. The important thing, and what's usually missing from that Moscow model, is that success criteria that we talked about. So if you're doing a product requirements document or somebody in your team is doing it, ask them who will do this and what's the measurable success criteria, especially for the must-have items. Once discovery is nailed, we move into this research phase. And there's so many ways to do research, but we want to understand through interviewing users either remotely or through surveys or through really sophisticated AI prompts these days. What are users doing? How are they spending their 8 hours a day or 10 hours a day? Or what's their day look like? How do they spend their time? What's delighting them? What's frustrating them? And if they're using your product and they're frustrated or they're delighted, is there something that maybe you haven't thought of that they wish you would do? So that's sometimes called the magic wand question. But you have to interview users. If you're not interviewing them, you can message me on LinkedIn or wherever you find me, and I'd be happy to point you into the direction of a couple different tools. SurveyMonkey is great. I like to use Useberry, which I'll show you in a minute because it integrates with the platforms that I use. So you need to make sure you have your benchmarks, you have your success criteria from discovery. Just draw the line in the sand. Say we need 50% of the first 100 users to sign up within 6 days. And then we'll instrument how we're going to measure that to make sure we keep an eye on the success criteria and the North Star metric. Here's an example of a user survey that we sent to users. And I've highlighted a few things here that had nothing to do with what we are working on, but what we learned through asking them what frustrates you the most about your job or workflow. We learned about all of these other things that we weren't working on, and we had to pivot and work on those things, or at least make a case to work on those things. But had we not done this and we launched a new feature, a lot of these things are just getting in the way of the user ever even using that feature that we are working on. So I think that if you're not doing a user interview process, you're probably missing what the real problems are. you're going to spend 3 to 4 weeks to months working on something that's not actually the real problem. And this is a result from a Useberry survey, but you could easily do this in SurveyMonkey or even a Google form if you wanted to. We move into this architect phase. So architect's really about, on a design perspective, it's about wireframes and user flows and site maps, and a solution really starts to take shape. It can be very lo-fi. There's hundreds of resources on Figma. You could even ask GPT to do some of this for you. I prefer to use FigJam and Figma for doing my my architecture, my wireframes, and my user flows, because I can then send it into Useberry or Maze or some other usability testing platform and get feedback for it right in my design process. But this is all about sort of just getting the concept down and showing the concept to users before you spend tons of time building a design system or a style guide or finessing button shapes and button sizes and button colors. Just get the concept down quickly in wireframes and sketches, but start to measure it. You can take a low fidelity sketch or wireframe of your product and put it in front of people and ask them to give you feedback, click on it, try to accomplish that task that we defined using the wireframes, and you'll discover early that where you thought people were going to go to do things isn't where they actually end up going. Another benefit of this is during the architect phase, what you see here is like a typical product map or application map where it shows that I'm going into, like I'm a patient and I'm going into maybe a profile or my medical history or my medication list or some sort of documentation or an action plan. But what happens during the architecture phase is you define the structure of the app, but that should also inform in that building phase and that release phase the name of the events that you pass into your product analytics. So we'll take a look at that in a moment. But the structure here you see is location, component, and event. So the location where the event happens is profile, and then the component that the user is using is the prescriber's component, or maybe the medication history component, and then there's an event. So they go into the prescriber's area, they complete an event of adding or removing or modifying. The way that the architecture is built should inform that build phase. So when I say agile everything and the triad communicating constantly, the architect phase very rarely helps the engineer set up that product analytics tracking. That's because measurement is not always part of the process. So you've got to make measurement part of everything you're doing. You're architecting and diagramming this thing to hit that success metric that we stated in discovery. So when you're doing your wireframes, these wireframes can be used to implement the instrumentation in the build and release phase. So then we get into design, and I've been a designer all my life. That's how I came into the internet back in the late 90s as a designer. I was designing in Photoshop 4.5. There were no layers. Then there was Photoshop, and Illustrator was the tool. I spent a lot of time designing in Keynote, and then there was Sketch, and now there's Figma, and now there's incredible tools like Lovable and Bolt and Magic Path. There's so many design tools right now, and they're all fine. Whatever tool you're using is going to work, and you can apply this process to whatever tool you're using. I prefer Figma today, but I am starting to lean heavy into Magic Path and Lovable, and now Figma has this MCP server where you can prompt it to use your own design system to build prototypes, and that is pretty amazing. So it's early for me. I still prefer to do things the way that I did, but I'm keeping an eye on AI and where these prototyping tools are going. Whatever tool you're using, find a way to integrate your usability testing. So as you're designing, you're spending more and more time on the details. You have to be measuring and doing user testing in this design phase as well. And you're still paying attention to the same metric. So in your wireframe phase, maybe your wireframe prototype had a conversion rate of 33%. And you said, okay, in this design phase, I'm going to improve the design based on what I learned. you want to get this design, this high fidelity prototype up to a 70% conversion rate. So at least 7 out of 10 of the people that you test with can accomplish that task successfully the first time. So here's a look at a test result from Useberry. We tested a prototype, a high fidelity prototype with 41 people, and it took them an average of 32.5 seconds to complete the task, that's pretty good. If you think about like you're working and you get an important task done in 32 seconds, that's pretty decent. But there's a 45% misclick rate, which meant that people were clicking somewhere that they would have led to like lost time. It wasn't quite the correct click. But what Useberry gives you is in your prototypes is a heat map of where people were clicking, the time it takes them to complete that task. Because remember, we defined the goal, the user task, the success metric. So Useberry lets us test how we're doing in the design phase before we ever spend time writing code or passing it off to engineering. Here's another look at a Useberry test result. What's amazing about Useberry, and there's other tools that are doing this now, is that you can re-watch the person using your design prototype, and you can sort of learn where they're clicking. So if you see somebody that finished the task really quick, like 15 seconds, or somebody that took 1minute and 35 seconds, you can go back and watch exactly what they did and where they clicked. And that was really innovative a few years ago, where you could take that to your team and say, hey, we designed this thing and look what's happening. So during your sprint reviews or your meetings or a quick Zoom call, show your team what people are actually doing so they can learn as well. Here's an example heat map. Like this one sells really well for leadership teams that aren't really involved. Showing them this heat map, they instantly understand what's going on here. So you can see where people are clicking. This is a great way if you're a designer and you feel like, I always forget the name of this thing because I don't believe in it. Imposter syndrome. Like there's this fear that designers have that they're not good enough, and that's very subjective. So these tools and Useberry and these heat maps, these are very objective focused design tests. So you don't have to worry about if your design looks good or it's the right color, it's aesthetically pleasing. If it's converting and people are clicking in the right place, that's all that matters. The design is less important than that success metric. So heat maps have been a great way for junior designers to get over this like fear of not being a good designer. And it's also a great way just to quickly show leadership how well the design's working. And then we move into this build phase. And this is where the design goes to code. And because you have success metrics, because you have that conversion rate, you have those usability testing reports, when things go to code, you want to make sure that they continue to perform as well or better in the live production environment as they did in the design phase. I'm going to skip past this standardization because this is pretty technical. But what happens is all of that work that we did in discovery and research and architecture and design, it's all aimed at that success metric and measuring it. So it's important in the build phase to make sure that that's also built into the code so that when you get the demo from the engineer, it actually looks and performs the way that you think it should. The release phase is all about hitting that success metric. So you've built the product, you're ready to go live, you've got your dashboard set up and your alerts, you're ready to measure the actual live code. I love using Mixpanel for this, but there's other tools like PostHog or Pendo. There's tons of analytics tools. I really love Mixpanel for its low cost and ease of use. It has this ability to alert automatically when a conversion rate falls below a threshold. So if your success criteria for time to value was 70% conversion rates and less than 2 minutes to complete the task, if you go over 2 minutes or under that conversion rate, it'll automatically email you or your team and let you know that, hey, something's wrong. We need to take a look at this. So we're getting into an example of how this all actually works. And I have about 13 minutes left. So thanks for holding on. The key takeaways here, though, with the process is that There's 6 phases. There's opportunities to win fast, not fail fast. Each of those phases is about 16% of success. So if you're a team of 3 in the triad, you own 32% of your success rate. And if you're a team of 6, then you own 16%. But as that team grows, you got to make sure that responsibility is there, and we're still measuring. It's really, really important to test the product from start to finish, from concept to customer, with usability testing and getting user feedback. And as much as possible, especially with something like Mixpanel, you want to automate reporting and automate alerts so you know when that North Star metric or that success metric is falling below the threshold that you set. Okay, so let's actually take a look at time to value and how you can calculate the return on design. I get a lot of questions during this process on, oh, we don't know what to measure, but there's really only 3 things that you can measure. There's 3 flavors of performance. It's time, emotion, and finance. And all 3 are really easy to measure. Time is the most important thing. So you always measure how long it takes somebody to get to that value moment. Then you want to measure the emotion, like, does it feel good? Is the conversion rate high? Is sentiment positive or negative? And you can get sentiment through those user interviews and surveys that you do. And it's pretty darn easy now with ChatGPT just to throw the responses in and prompt it to tell you what the sentiment is of your first round of testing. And finances last, because if you save time, if you design something that saves time and feels good, it's going to make money. So don't worry about money. Like, most startups get caught up in, oh, how are we going to get revenue positive? Don't worry about it. If you save time and feel good with your product, it's going to make money. So let's take a look quickly at a task level example. Everything happens at the task level. So break down your target audience into subgroups, into tasks. And for that task, you're going to say, okay, this user is going to do this task in this amount of time and at least 70% of the time. It's pretty easy to do some napkin math to measure your potential revenue. So you can calculate or multiply your tasks completed by the time to complete that task times the potential task revenue generation. Maybe like every time somebody does this thing, it earns revenue. And that gives you your revenue per completion. So if a user can complete one task in 2 minutes, and the potential that gives them the potential of completing 30 tasks in 1 hour, and there's a potential revenue per completion of $10. Like, maybe every time somebody does something, it costs them $10, like to trade a stock, for example, whatever it might be. Then you have your potential revenue per hour at $300 per hour if it takes 2 minutes. Well, what if we reduce that time from 2 minutes to 1 minute? Then you double your revenue. So what you're seeing here is an example from an iteration that we did on a call center platform where we are working with pharmacists that were doing medication reconciliation, and they were paid for each one $100. And what you see here is how much that particular person could earn revenue-wise in a week, a month, and a year if it took 12 minutes versus 15 minutes. So just shaving 3 minutes off the time it takes for that user to get to the value, it results in a huge amount of revenue, especially when you multiply your workforce. This is a Google Sheet calculator that I use where you can plug in your employees' full-time employee salary and then multiply that by your conversion rate and actually figure out your revenue based on your workforce salary. If you start doing this early, this is feasible when you got like 3 or 4 people working for you. But as you get bigger, there's tools that automate this. But this is important to be tracking revenue. Design leads to the ability to actually track the actual revenue you're making plus the what you're going to pay your employees. And then in the live production environment, what you're seeing here is a funnel report. So this is showing a user task in 3 different steps. It's currently performing at a 50% conversion rate. In Mixpanel, you can compare where it is now versus where it was in the past. So when you see that conversion rate drop or the time go up, you can automatically have it alert you that something is trending in the wrong direction and go investigate. And then Mixpanel will actually email you and your team a report every Monday at 9 a.m. or when something's going wrong so that you can always be notified when you're failing at a rate higher than what you set out to in discovery. Woo, there we go. So a quick recap. There are 3 things to measure: time, emotion, and money. Just focus on time first and conversion rate, that feel good, that emotion. Automate as much of this as you can. I prefer to use Mixpanel and the auto capture feature in Mixpanel to implement this and track it. And automate your team communication. Aside from things taking too long, the number one reason that most companies fail is because of communication. So there's a lot of things you can do in your design process to automate alerts on failure and cross-team communication. That's what I got. Thank you all for holding on for a second there. We got a few minutes to field any questions that we've got. Morgan, do we have anything in the chat?
Yeah, well, let some people think about and enter any of your questions, or feel free to unmute. Amazing resources, Jono, and we will be setting up the presentation and the recording to all attendees today. So anyone have any questions that you'd like to talk through with us here in the last few minutes? I'll kick us off with one. We did have an investor, someone in the investment space on the call earlier who had to drop, and especially that last chunk that you just shared on the metrics to track. What would you say of these pieces are relevant for sharing with a VC or a investor, and what should be kept internal for measurements?
Boy, I am in the camp of share everything early and often. If you can't share it with an investor, then you don't have trust. So measurement leads to trust. And I say share it all. It's better to find out now than 6 months down the road that they're not going to invest. So it's just be honest, give them access to your Mixpanel report so they don't have to ask you, how's it going?
Okay, great. Thank you so much.
Yeah, awesome question. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, I know we're at time. I just thank you so much for all the great recommendations on tools. And I know that one of the biggest challenges that startups see is an overwhelming amount of tools and resources. And I want to go back to one thing I heard you say, Jono, which I wrote down, was the goal in all of this is to first define success, and then to focus on aiming 16% of your success at each step. And then what's that time value for your most important customer? And so if we focus in on that with all of our tools and all of our design, I think you've really helped us accelerate and include failure into our process for a more successful life overall. So any closing words that you'd like to say, John?
No, thank you. I just want to say thank you, Morgan, for having me. Thank you, everybody, for joining me. I'm an open book. I'm easy to find. Reach out. I'm happy to set up a 15-minute Zoom call and just talk to you. I love learning, and it helps me in my job too. So I'm an open book. Reach out. I'm easy to find.
Yeah, and I will go ahead and drop your LinkedIn in the chat. And we also have a newsletter if anyone would like to attend future events or keep updated on some of the free resources available. Thank you all so much, and I wish you a wonderful rest of your week.
Thanks, y'all.